Hey everyone, welcome to the podcast. My name is Constance Thurmond. I am the Principal of Kora Insights, where I work with emerging managers to provide year-round programmatic solutions that help unlock capital, consistent capital from both their LPs and portfolio companies. And I'm so delighted to be here this morning with Tahira Dosani, who has come in from a place very far away, specifically Washington, D.C.
A very long flight.
A very long flight. I'm going to say just to join us, but maybe there were other incentives and motives, which is fine.
But this is primary.
Thank you. And I'd love to get started with just an introduction, who you are, specifically what organization you're with, hint, hint, Resilience VC, and also to what is your favorite thing to do outside of work these days? And we're kind of in this seasonal transition, right? So I don't know if that impacts your answer, but I'll leave it there.
Thank you so much, Constance. My name is Tahira Dosani. I am the co-founder and managing partner of Resilience VC, which is an early stage venture fund focused on investing in seed stage fintech startups that build financial resilience for American consumers and small businesses. Mm-hmm. And I know we're going to talk more about resilience later, but to your other question about what I do outside of work, I am such a warm weather girl that I'm very sad that summer is coming to a close, with these cooler mornings and evenings. I'm not getting to do as much outdoor stuff as I normally would love to, but I think the thing I probably spend most time doing outside of work is martial arts.
Unexpected.
It's something I got into a few years ago. I didn't grow up doing it, but I train almost every day in boxing, kickboxing, Krav, and jiu-jitsu, and I help run a women's self-defense program in DC, and also train victims of human trafficking, survivors of human trafficking, supporting them in their recoveries. It's a big part of my life.
So what I'm hearing is that Tahira can also kick your you-know-whats. Just kidding. I mean, not kidding. But that is phenomenal.
Well, it's a great physical outlet.
Yeah.
Some days you just really want to hit something.
Yes, absolutely.
But also it's something that really helps me build a lot of focus and, resilience.
Yeah.
It's, I think so much of what you learn on the mat in that context is applicable to the rest of your life. And I'm a big believer that everyone, especially women and people of color, other groups that are at greater risk of experiencing violence, should be trained in defending ourselves physically. Of course, you do everything you can to avoid those situations. Right. But if you find yourself in one, having the physical skills and an understanding of your environment such that you can defend yourself and the people you care about, I think is really important. So I'm a big advocate of everyone getting access to that training.
I am so delighted. Thank you for sharing that, first of all. And for those of you who may be listening in from DC, who maybe fall into one of those categories, or women who may want to learn how to defend yourself.
Anyone.
Or anyone. It seems like you're the person to get in touch with. And also to, I love that you get to focus. We haven't talked about this, but I spent a significant portion of my life working with survivors of human trafficking. And so it's a group that I care deeply for. And so it's really encouraging to hear that that's one of the aspects of the programming that you focus on. So congrats on that. Wow. And also as a warm weather girly myself, I too am mourning the change of seasons. I know everyone is delighted over pumpkin lattes, but not all of us partake in that joy. So thank you for sharing that.
I'm with you on that one too.
So I'd love to know, how did you step into your role as co-founder and managing partner of Resilience VC? And I know there's so much of your personal journey that we can talk to, so I'd love as much or as little as you'd like to share in regards to how you ended up where you are now.
Yeah, well, for me, I think my path to here wasn't necessarily a linear one, right? It's easy to kind of look back now and connect the dots, but when I was like the last 20 years of my career, it wasn't necessarily step one, step two, step three to get here. I was really lucky. I was able to be opportunistic and pursue different things that came my way. But I do think the one consistent thread through all of it was really looking for opportunities that helped me see how both technology and business could create impact in various ways. And so that has really been there throughout everything I've done. I started my career out of college in management consulting. I was at Bain for a few years, and I got to build a really strong strategic analytic foundation for my career. And I got to work with lots of different organizations in lots of different sectors at various stages of growth, facing a myriad of different challenges. And I got to understand how, different approaches to analytics and to strategy could help those companies grow and scale. And then from there, I took a pretty sharp turn off the traditional consultant career path, and I moved to Kabul, Afghanistan, to work for one of the first telecom operators that was setting up there post-Taliban. This was in the early 2000s.
Wow.
And at that time, Afghanistan had almost no communications infrastructure. There were 1,000 landlines in a country of 32 million people, no cell phones.
Wow.
And we brought some of the first mobile telephony into the country, enabling not just a new industry and sector to grow and thrive, but also enabling communications infrastructure to become commonplace and ubiquitous, enabling commerce and trade that happens as a result of being able to check crop prices in the next town without having to go over there,
Right.
or make an investment so that you can actually, you're more likely to put money into something when you can call and check on it and know how it's doing and have ways of communicating with folks. We also saw huge improvements in social health indicators, right? Maternal mortality, deaths in childbirth dropped because people can call a doctor.
Wow.
Overnight, you would see movement in these indicators when we could bring coverage into a new village or town. And we were also the largest private sector company, the largest employer. We were 6% of the country's GDP at that time.
Wow.
So, a business that was thriving and scaling from a revenue and profit perspective, and also creating significant impact. And one of the things that I did when I was in Kabul was launch a mobile money product. One of the first mobile money implementations in the world, and one that was particularly relevant in that market at that time. Only about 3% of the Afghan population had a bank account. 97% were unbanked. But as we extended mobile phone coverage, we saw the majority of the population now having access to a cell phone.
Wow.
And so we were able to build a mobile money solution that let people hold, store, and send money directly from their phones, right? And they could have a wallet or an account connected to their phone number where they could transact from without the need for a bank account. And so that enabled a whole nother set of economic activities, right? Lending became more ubiquitous because it was much easier to disperse funds and to make repayments, right? A small business owner didn't have to shut down their business and travel for a day or two to the nearest bank branch to make a repayment. That could happen instantly,
Wow.
right? So you then saw an entire financial ecosystem. You saw people able to make money transfers, domestic remittances, sending money back to families in villages, etc., all be able to happen much more seamlessly. And that really is what got me interested in this intersection of technology and financial services, which is where I've spent the rest of my career. So from then, after that time on the operating side, really building and scaling products, I then moved on to the investing side, which is where I've spent more than 15 years now working to support and scale the founders who are building products at the intersection of technology and financial services, products that can be scalable and profitable, and products that can meaningfully create more financial and economic stability and resilience for their users.
My goodness. I appreciate you so much giving that context, because it was such a, I mean, I'm not an expert in Afghanistan, right? But that time that you speak about, and specifically with 97% of the population being unbanked, can you give me just briefly the time scale? Because like it to me, it seems like in some ways this particular solution was almost instant. I mean, such as the example you gave of someone being able to call an ambulance so that way they could give birth at a hospital nearby, right? I'm just curious, like how long, from when you were able to, let's say, implement a certain number of communication towers to when you started seeing these kinds of impacts that you were speaking about, and also too, like when we're thinking about what you do now, right, and that kind of time scale. I don't know if there's a connection there, but I am curious, like how what you saw when you were on the ground.
I mean, it wasn't instant, right? It wasn't overnight, because first you have to build the tower, but in order to build the tower, you have to build the road,
right,
to put up a tower. I mean, and so like we were a telecom company, but we were one of the top largest road builders in the country, because we had to like create the infrastructure from like a road perspective to be able to put the towers up, right? Then you put the tower up, and then you turn on coverage, and you also have to then build an entire ecosystem of being able to, like the people who are selling airtime and selling the prepaid credits for the cell phone service and selling the hardware, right? So all of that has to come up. Entire ecosystems have to be built up around a given product. And so then people had cell phones and got used to using cell phones, got used to putting money on a cell phone as airtime credit that they could use and spend down. And then that enabled them to get used to this idea of like, oh, I can put money on my phone and hold a store of value in my phone. And right now it's just airtime. And, if my friend is out of credit and I need to send airtime to them, I can transfer that. So can't I do that with money that's not just airtime, right? And so, it took months of use of people getting comfortable with a new technology, with a new product, how to use it. But then, when we first launched our mobile payment solution, it was a text-based solution on a phone. But you're also talking about a country that had very low literacy levels at that time. So a text-based solution alone wasn't sufficient. So then we had to launch an IVR, an interactive voice response component to it, so that people could actually hear spoken instructions. It wasn't enough to have a text-based prompt, right? So there is constant iteration, as with any new product and service that gets launched. Okay, well, there's a barrier to usage here, right? How do we adjust that? Okay, well, we'll launch this piece. Okay, now this design element has to be worked out. Well, if someone has to call and listen to voice prompts, that makes the process take longer. Does that mean they're less likely to use it in these instances?
Absolutely.
How do we adjust for that, right? So it takes months, even years, really, for something that is, I think, this fundamentally new to a market to get implemented. Now, that's not true for every new product or service. And when we're talking about a market like the U.S. today, there is so much more infrastructure. There is so much more comfort with technology, right? Many people in this country today are digitally native. But, we are seeing, as new technologies get implemented with the advent of AI, right, we're seeing that there is a learning curve. We've had now Gen AI in the market and available for a couple of years now, but there are people who are just now starting to use it, or who are discovering new use cases each day. And so, you see those parallels with every new, I would say, foundational technology that gets implemented in a given market.
Yeah. No, thank you for that context. I mean, I think from the outside looking in, one of the things that I also appreciate about that is I do think that as a founder, right, there are so many layers that you take them on as they come, right? You obviously do your best to circumvent them, but nonetheless, having an investor like you who understands that certain solutions do have perhaps complexities that are really challenging to foresee, and nonetheless the patience to be able to implement those out is really encouraging. And I think to your point of even like where we're at right now in the United States, and specifically what resilience focuses on is this idea, from my understanding, that very much there is still so much inequity and inaccessibility to some fundamental financial, not only products, but also just like, I'd love to learn your perspective of why specifically, like why American consumers and small businesses, and what specifically do you want to help them accomplish through Resilience VC's portfolio of companies?
It's a great question because, on the surface, you can look at the U.S. and say, well, unlike a market like Afghanistan, the U.S. is over 90% banked, right? People here have access to bank accounts and other financial products. And access is important, but it's not sufficient, right? It's necessary, certainly. But what matters is that people have access to a whole suite of high quality, relevant, and affordable products that they can use that create ultimately the outcomes that we care about, right? Access alone isn't enough. We're trying to drive towards better financial resilience and stability. And when we think about what we mean, what enables financial resilience and stability, we think about financial resilience as having three core drivers. One is more net income, right?
Love that one.
Yeah. And that's more inflows, that's more money coming in. And it's reduced expenses, right? It's having access to more dollars, because at some point, if you don't have enough money coming in, there's just so much you can do, right? So how can we get more money into people's pockets? Secondly, how can we make sure that that money translates into assets for those people, right? It's not just money that's coming in and then going out,
right?
But that money is actually building assets and over time building wealth, ideally generational wealth for people, or for a small business building more physical assets, more inventory, more storefronts, etc., to enable the growth of that business. And so, that can be short-term or long-term savings, retirement savings. It can be home ownership or car ownership. It can be, anything that really is enabling someone to build wealth and move up and out of poverty over time. And then the third piece is the ability to mitigate or better recover from shocks and risks, because those are inevitable, right? We cannot prevent adverse events from happening in people's lives. You can lose your job. You or someone in your family can get sick. Your car can break down. There can be a hurricane, a wildfire, damage to your home, right?
Absolutely.
We call them shocks, but they're inevitable.
Right.
The reality is that they will happen sooner or later. Adverse events will happen in people's lives, and people need to be able to, one, mitigate the risk of those things happening, and two, when they do happen, bounce back. Right? And so that risk mitigation and recovery is that third core driver of resilience. So we're focused on products that don't just give someone a bank account. A bank account is important, right? In order to save, in order to be able to transact, having access to a debit card or a bank account is really useful. But having a bank account in and of itself doesn't create financial resilience. It is the savings product that does. And it's the savings product that's well designed that makes it easy and enables people to save more effectively, that optimizes between what's sitting in their savings and in their checking account so that they're earning maximum yield on savings, but never overdrafting a checking account and paying fees there, right? It's, and so we have to think about the product that gives more than access, that drives utility and enables usage in a way that that outcome that we care about, more income, more assets, lower risk, is achieved so that someone can be more financially stable. Because 70% of Americans are not financially healthy today.
Wow.
It's not a small niche problem. It is the largest untapped market opportunity in financial services in this country.
Wow.
So, there's huge opportunity. And the businesses that are first movers here that figure out how to effectively serve this population and tap into this market are going to see massive growth and returns. And so in so many ways, it is the ideal problem for venture to solve. Because venture works well when we're talking about disruptive solutions for large addressable markets. And that's what we need here.
I love that. One very basic question for me, a novice in this market. How are you measuring those outcomes?
Yeah.
Like, where do you find that kind of data? I'm thinking too for investors who maybe are not necessarily in this exact niche, or maybe to other startups who are interested in listening in. Like, if they want to continue to build or start to build to address this specific market, like, where do they look to find this kind of information?
Yeah, so, for us, tracking data around our companies is a critical part of our role as an investor. And that's financial data, that's operational data, and that includes the impact data. And to me, in most cases, if your core product or service is creating the kind of impact that we care about, then your financial and operational metrics are your impact metrics.
Gotcha.
Right? Let me give you a couple of examples. We have a company in our portfolio called Mirza. Mirza is based here in New York City, and they help families access government benefits, starting with childcare benefits, right? There are billions of dollars of childcare benefits that are available primarily at the state and local level, the county level, some federal. But for most families, most working families, they don't know what benefits are out there. They don't know whether they're eligible for those benefits that are out there. And the application process to access those benefits is onerous and complex. And so Mirza works to solve all of those issues. They help families understand what's available, what they're eligible for, and then enables a quick application process where they can actually submit on that person's behalf. And the average family that's eligible gets over $10,000 a year in childcare benefits. And these are families that are typically earning less than $50K of household income a year.
Wow.
So this is meaningful amounts of money. And access to childcare means that families can actually work more and generate more income directly, right? So it's really powerful. Lack of access to childcare is one of the biggest drivers of the gender wage gap, because often the costs of childcare exceed what someone can make, especially if they're earning minimum wage. And so it prevents women in particular from going back to work after they have kids.
Wow.
Right? And so what Mirza is doing is enabling more net income coming into families. It's more money in the door through access to these benefits. And so for a company like Mirza, they are tracking from an operational perspective how many applications they're submitting, how many customers they have, average number of benefits dollars that customers are receiving, right? That's core operational data that the company needs to know how their product is working and whether it's being well received. Right. But that's also the impact data that we care about. That is net income coming in, right? And so we track for all of our companies based on the resilience driver that they're achieving, whether it's net income, asset building, or risk mitigation. We track what we call the resilience dollars that are flowing in. So all kind of net new childcare dollars that are coming into families, this company is tracking because that's core operational data. And we take that data and we think about that as new net income captured. I'll give you one more example. We have a company in the portfolio called Chase. Chase helps car owners really deal with one key category of risk, which is a car breaking down. And, so they provide car warranties to cover what is really the largest category of cost of car ownership, which is maintenance and repairs. We're mandated to have auto insurance in case of an accident. But the real cost of car ownership is less on the accident side and much more on the maintenance and repair side. And as the average age of vehicles on the road gets older, especially with tariffs coming into place that make new cars more expensive, people are holding on to older cars longer. And that means those cars are more likely to break down. Right. Car warranties, that entire vehicle service contractor warranty industry has not been a great one historically. To date, warranties are primarily sold either through a dealership when you buy a car or through call centers, outbound call centers with pretty aggressive sales tactics, right? And so they're calling you, they're telling you, well, you'd have this coverage, but as a consumer, it's not clear exactly what you have. You're not getting to compare options and coverages and pricing. You don't have a sense of quality of the provider and what their claims payout rates are or any of that. And so Chase has created the first online digital marketplace for car warranties, where you can actually get real clarity on what's covered and what's not, on price of different options, and of quality of different providers. And so you can select the coverage that's best for you. And so when you have an adverse event like your car breaks down and you have to decide between I need my car so that I can get to work, right? Because that's how the majority of people in this country get to their jobs and earn their income. And this repair is going to cost me $1,000, which I can't afford without going into debt. 60% of Americans cannot afford the average car repair, which is $1,000, without going into debt. Wow. But if you had a Chase warranty, that would be covered, right? So it lowers the cost of managing those repairs, and because most people are paying for their warranty not entirely up front but on a monthly basis, there's an income smoothing element that comes into play there, right? So for a company like that, again, as core operational data, they're tracking their claims rates, they're tracking the amount of dollars that get paid out, and that's the amount of protection that is being issued being created for that end user. Right. So we're able to track the dollars of risk that are protected or mitigated for that end user. Yeah. Right?
Yeah, but thank you for those examples. And also, too, I love these companies. Seriously.
Me too.
Yeah, no, you definitely love these companies. But no, just because I think to something that we talked about in an earlier conversation that we had, with these examples that you give, and you're talking about resilience dollars.
Yeah.
A metric that sounds native to your company.
Yes.
But nonetheless, you're also tracking real operational data, right? And specifically their end user and everything that comes in between. And so I think to me, it just becomes evident that these two things are, AKA being returns and impact, these are embedded in the companies that you're inherently investing in. But I'd love to know your perspective on that. Specifically, what did you mean when you told me that? And I think these examples speak to it, but would love if you can expand for someone who's listening in.
Oh, thank you so much for bringing that up, because that is in so many ways core to our thesis at Resilience VC. We fundamentally believe that the companies that are able to help their users be more financially resilient will see those users, one, be better customers, right? They're going to spend more on those platforms. They are going to be better repayers if it's a credit product, be higher spenders if it's a payment product, etc., right? But they'll also be more loyal customers because they're seeing the value that that business is creating for them. Those companies will see lower acquisition costs because there will be better word of mouth and more organic growth for those businesses, right? Ultimately, a financially resilient customer is a better customer. Right. And being able to create real value for your customers means more loyalty, higher revenues, lower acquisition costs, which means more revenue and more profitability and more growth for that business.
Yeah, absolutely. That's I think something that we can all learn from, right? Because ultimately too, when as we know, like the quality of the customer, the end user is ultimately has all these reverberations up the ecosystem, up to you as the investor, up to your LPs and beyond. And I think on the note of LPs, which is my poor transition for today, but one of the things that really stood out from when we initially got connected was Resilience's unique approach to cultivating LP relationships, to ultimately the LPs that you chose to let into your fund. And I'd love to understand like what your process was for raising capital, specifically because you launched your first fund earlier this year.
Yeah, we announced it in February of this year. We are currently investing out of an oversubscribed $58 million Fund 1. Thank you. And, we were so fortunate to have an incredible set of LPs supporting us. And it's a really diverse set of LPs. One, from a institutional type perspective, right? We have asset managers, we have endowments, we have foundations, we have family offices, we have high net worth individuals. We have a set of LPs that bring different networks, different perspectives, and different value to us as a GP. And that's really important. And then when we look deeper within that LP base, one thing that was important to me and to my partner was, how do we make sure that what we're building at Resilience, because as we talked about, we believe this fund will achieve top tier venture returns, because we're investing in companies that are going to be scalable and profitable and impactful. And so, how do we make sure that a diverse set of LPs gets to benefit from the wealth creation that we hope this fund will generate, right? Because this is an asset class. Venture is an asset class, or private equity more broadly is an asset class, has historically been dominated by people who are very high income or are institutional, right? And it's not an asset class that everyone has had access to, because it's had high minimum entry points and it's been gate kept, right?
Can I pause you there for 1 second to just ask you what that high entry point typically has been from your experience?
I mean, depending on the fund and the size of the fund, it can be in the millions of dollars, even with other smaller venture funds and even with emerging managers, we can often see that number at the $500,000 or even $1 million level.
Right. Thank you.
And so we really intentionally kept our individual minimum at $100,000 and then cut that in half for people who were first-time participants in this asset class.
Wow.
Specifically for women who, had not seen this as an option for them, had not seen it as a way to build wealth or diversify their asset base, had not participated in this asset class at all. And for us, that meant, a longer process, more education for that LP base around what it means to be an LP. How should you think about selecting a GP to invest in? What are the questions you should ask? What does this look like? But that was well worth it because the majority of our individual LPs are first-time investors in ventures and asset class, and over 40% are women.
I love that. You know, it's reminding me of a post that I saw from a founder. Her name's Jennifer Kamara, and she talks a lot about good life design. I'm a huge fan. And one of the things that she gave, and I promise this will come back in a second.
I love a good story.
she talked about moving to a new neighborhood with her family, and out of state, from Texas, from Austin to Ann Arbor, Michigan. And as we all know, and I'm sure some of the companies in your portfolio may solve, the housing market is insane. And it's really hard to find a home that's affordable and or even within, dare you ask for something to be in your dream, your dream home, or to have 2 rooms for your kids or whatever it may be. Anyway, so what she did was she and her husband reversed engineered it where they were able to put out ads around the neighborhood saying, like, essentially pitching themselves as a family. We're a family, young family, 2 entrepreneurs. This is what we're looking for. This is our budget. And something like within a week, they had a roster of callbacks. They were able to close their home within a month, something like this.
Yeah.
And in some ways, what you did with your LPs reminds me of this, because not only are you paving the way for folks who traditionally, as you're saying, there would be a higher barrier to entry for the asset class, but you're also in some ways, and correct me if I'm wrong, but kind of cultivating the kind of person you want to be involved, because at the end of the day too, like, this is a risk for you as much as it is a risk for them, right? Because they do have a say in your company. Absolutely. And so to me, what you did was you reverse engineer it, and you said, like, hey, like, this is what an LP does, and this could be you. and so just practically, did you have like a course, or were you just taking calls and educating as a part of that, or was it more so word of mouth? Like, I would love to know just practically how that came to be.
We didn't do a course, although it's something that I've thought about. And, there are some folks who are thinking about building those things and creating those educational pathways for women who want to be LPs. The organization How Women Invest, I think, is doing a really good job with some of that. So there definitely are folks out there. We did it more on a kind of one-off individual basis.
Cool.
And really the idea was, like, let's meet people where they are and talk them through how this could be a fit for them. But I think, when we think about scaling this with future funds, certainly trying to formalize some of that could be a really good idea.
Yeah. Initially, too, like, if you don't mind me asking, how did you find folks who would fall into this category? Was it in your personal network? Was it putting out the ask? Like, what did that look like this time around?
Certainly started with personal networks, right? Yeah. People who knew me or my co-GP, either personally or professionally. And I will say also people for whom the mission and the vision resonated.
Yeah.
Right. I think, for a lot of people, the idea of being able to align their values and how they make their money is powerful.
Yep.
And so we created an opportunity for that.
Yeah, absolutely. And another thing, too, that I'll add on what you had shared with me initially was that you also call capital as you deploy it.
Yes, so, and that's actually very common for this asset class, right? Yeah. Sometimes people call it annually just to minimize the burden on LPs for doing regular capital calls. But, from an IRR perspective, if you took all of that money up front, you're actually calling that money before you need it, and so the IRR clock starts ticking then. Mm-hmm. So for us and for most venture investors, you want to call real time. Mm-hmm. And so what that means is that, say, a $50,000 commitment over a 10-year fund life, it's a little bit more in the first few years, but it averages out to about $5,000 a year, which then is very accessible for professionals who are mid-career, right? Yeah. In a way that when you say 50,000 or 100,000, that feels like a big chunk of money. But when you think about what it would mean annually, it feels much more manageable.
Yeah, absolutely. I would love to, I know you're not fundraising right now, but when Fund 2 comes,
Yeah.
how can folks get involved? What kind of folks do you want involved? And by folks, I mean LPs.
Yeah.
And where should we direct these LPs who may be listening who are interested in getting involved with resilience?
Yeah, I really appreciate that. I mean, as you said, we are not fundraising right now. At this moment, our focus is really on deploying capital, on finding incredible founders who are building for resilience, but building scalable, profitable models and supporting the companies that we've already invested in, right? That's our focus. But roughly a year from now, we expect to be back in market, looking at a launch of our second fund. And, would love to hear from anyone who's interested. Today, if you're a founder building, would love to hear from you. And then at any point, happy to start the conversation with someone that's interested in on the LP side. You can reach us via our website or reach out to me on LinkedIn directly.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you for that. That's exciting. So I kind of want to go back to your portfolio.
Yeah.
And the reason why, and I'll just give some context, right? So Kora specifically, and a huge part of why we exist, is because we believe in the power of community, and specifically community as it relates to the community role that investors play in like building and shaping ecosystems. I mean, there's several ways we can look at this. When you think about it in the greater scheme of things, right? Venture and a venture fund is working with a small set of people, right? A handful of companies. Maybe a larger handful depending on the size. But nonetheless, you're working day in and day out with folks who are day to day with the final end user.
Yeah.
So in some of the companies that you spoke about, whether it be that end user who is looking to have benefits for their family, or that end user who is making sure that when their car inevitably breaks down, that they're not going to be in a huge financial hole. But it's all to say, like, how it's, I think what's interesting about resilience is that to that end user can end up carrying a large emotional burden, right? Because finances in particular are intense, right? They impact us all. Money is not, I believe personally, just not good or bad. It can be neutral, but it can feel very bad if you don't have enough of it. And it can feel very good if you do. And I think that's something we don't talk enough about. But anyways, it's like being, having money is inherently helpful.
Yes.
So it's all to say, like, how do you, in the position that you sit in, think through an investment thesis, like for the companies that you work with who are ultimately dealing with customers that have like some sort of emotional burden? I mean, I just think that your community perspective is so unique because of who you ultimately work with. And also too, for all the other areas that you mentioned during our conversation, like this is also just a matter of providing a good product to people who are going to be excited about wanting to come back. But would love like that specific angle because you do get to work with a group that affects a large part of the American population. Yeah.
Oh, it's such a good question. And I love the notion of community as a framing around this type of work, because community really matters at every level of what we do. And, you talked about the end user, so let's start there. As you said, challenges around people's financial lives are often deeply isolating because there's shame and guilt and kind of, the emotional burden that you talked about that sits with that. There was some data I saw a little while ago that said men are more comfortable talking about having erectile dysfunction than they are talking about being financially unstable.
Wow.
Right. I mean, that it's that level of isolation that exists around this topic. And so, we have to be able to be really clear about the fact that so much of this is structural. It's not on you or on any given individual that they are in a challenging financial position, and they are not alone. As we said, it is the majority of people in this country, 70% of Americans, right? Almost 2/3 of people in this country live paycheck to paycheck. That's not just low income folks. That happens in every income bracket, right? People are generally earning more or spending more than they are earning. People are not able to save adequately. People don't have the protection they need, and it's not their fault. And we're in this moment, in a moment today where we're seeing public safety nets erode.
Yeah.
We're seeing prices rise. We're seeing, right, tariffs are driving up prices. And consumer debt is at all-time highs. It's a really tough environment. And so the right set of products that, one, are targeting the populations that have historically been underserved. And not just underserved, but often exploited previously by our financial system. The very existence of those products makes people feel less alone, right? And then when those products are effective, they can create community, either directly as part of the product within the user base, or enable people to have conversations. Hey, this product really helped me, right? Let me tell you about it. And for any business, having a high net promoter score, right? Having customers that are advocates of your product is great, because it means your acquisition costs are lower. It means your loyalty is higher. Right? All of those things that we talked about that are drivers of return come into place when you can when you can create real value for your user and let them feel less alone in their challenges and enable them to talk about the things that they were so hesitant to talk about before.
Yeah.
So the right products create community and address some of the isolation that exists for the end user around these topics. For companies, right, for these businesses themselves, being a founder is it's a hard journey. And it's often a lonely and isolating path, right? Because when you're a founder, I'm a founder. I mean, we know these things intimately, but, you don't necessarily have someone above you who can take the burden off of you.
Right.
You hold it. You hold the responsibility for your business, for your employees and their livelihoods. You have responsibilities to your investors and, all of that, which makes it difficult. And so we try and create community within our portfolio. We also launched a program with a partner that provides coaching to our founders, and we provide, as part of our investment, a few months of we cover the cost of kind of integrative leadership coaching for our founders, so that they have, we try and be a point of support for them, but we're also investors, and we're making decisions around putting more capital into the business, etc. So we wanted to make sure founders had a confidential resource where they could be fully open about the challenges that they were facing and get support from a stable of coaches who is experienced. In fact, the Heartwood Collective, which is the coaching firm we work with, they work only with entrepreneurs. And so their coaches have real experience there supporting founders along this journey, because, resilient founders are better founders, and they're better able to build high-performing, impactful businesses. So creating community and support at the founder level is so important for us. For us as an emerging manager, our community of co-investors and other emerging next-gen VCs is also really critical, right? And we've been fortunate enough to participate in programs like Recast Accelerate program and others that are that have been really powerful in creating community across GPs. and helping us connect with LPs. And a number of our LPs are similarly, I think, really intentional about creating community across the fund managers they're invested in. So that's really helpful. And for me personally, I rely on my community, my friends, my family, my people to support me on my entrepreneurial journey and building this fund. I have a group of friends in DC where we do a walk in nature every week. And that community, that time is so important for me to be able to stay resilient and focused on the work that I do. Community is critical to me personally. And then for us, we talked about LPs earlier, but we really want to create community at the LP level as well. We want our LPs to know each other. We want them to really feel connected to us, to our founders, to the end user, all the way down, every level that I just mentioned, but also to grow that community of really impact-oriented LPs who see the world similarly to the way we do, who understand that resilience is a returns driver, that there's no trade-off between impact and returns in any way.
Thank you. And thank you for just going through kind of these different touch points that you have in your own life and in the life as a founder too, of how different folks are creating that or how you are helping foster that. I really love that that's something you're able to give your founders when it comes to coaching. And I think that it's really wise too to do it in a way that is close but also not directly with you, right?
Yeah.
Because they do need that level of support that is outside of someone who has a stake in their company. And I think too, to your point, and I'm just I was imagining too as you were talking, I was like, my goodness, I can't wait for Resilience to have some sort of gathering out that brings together all these folks outside of you. That's just be seen, America. I don't know what the tagline is, but I just think that to your point of even that crazy statistic of men being more willing to talk about erectile dysfunction versus financial instability. And I'm thinking of all these crazy ads that we see constantly. Nothing's ever hey, are you alone while you struggle to buy a meal? But it makes me think so much about how you have this beautiful opportunity, right? And intense one perhaps, to help people be seen, right? I think in many ways, which is exciting. I'm excited for you, and I'm glad that this is what you get to work on.
Thank you.
Truly. And we all have a couple notes to learn from your book of just some of the programs you mentioned, including Recast program, which I've heard great things about, so that's good to know. And then too, the ways that you're bringing your LPs together and wanting them to know each other, which I think is wise. Are you doing that through annual general meetings, or how has that looked like for you?
Yeah, AGMs certainly. Yeah. We host one a year in DC, and we're really, for us, being in DC was a really intentional decision, right? Because we invest in financial services, which is a heavily regulated sector. And so our ability to connect our companies to, to the policymakers and the regulators and help provide that pulse around what's happening on that front is critical. So getting to bring our founders, our LPs, our co-investors, or really the entire kind of DC fintech and venture communities together through our AGM is really fun. And we get to have, our AGM itself, but we also do an LP dinner, an industry-wide happy hour, et cetera, around those things. And then we get to work with other firms, other investors to do a number of other events. So, with New York FinTech Week, we did a kickoff party with Fiat Ventures and a couple of other organizations. At SoCap next month in San Francisco, we'll be partnering with Impact Capital Managers and a handful of other firms to do an Impact Innovators Happy Hour. And we a few times a year really try and do events that bring our community together. So those events really bring our broader broader community together, and then within the portfolio, we'll do a lot of more kind of individual introductions or small group initiatives to bring specific founders together.
I love it. I love it. This is music to my ears, truly. So I'm going to ask you some rapid fire questions. Are you
Bring
ready?
it on.
Okay. When is your next event or program? And how can people get involved? And no worries if you don't have a...
We actually, so the
Okay.
SoCap one that I mentioned, so
Okay.
if you'll be at SoCap or in San Francisco in October, we would love to have you join us. Shoot me a note on LinkedIn and I'd be happy to add you to the list.
Amazing. Exciting. Okay. Who else do you admire in the ecosystem who you feel like is doing this well? And this
Yeah.
I'm going to leave a little broad. And any dream collaborators?
Ooh, that's such a good question. I mentioned Fiat earlier. I mean, I think that's a team that does such a great job of keeping up a steady cadence of events and really bringing together founders, co-investors, LPs in a really intentional way. One of our LPs, Spring Point Partners, I think also does a really incredible job. They did I think they do every other year a gathering, but they had theirs earlier this year. And they were so intentional in thinking about how to bring together the GPs that they're invested in, really create community, enable space for open dialogue. It was really powerful. So I really enjoyed that.
Amazing. So it sounds like they are a collaborator.
They certainly are.
And a dream. Amazing.
Yes.
Any book or podcast,
Yeah.
aside from ours, that you recommend to our audience who may be interested in the space? And specifically maybe when it comes to your intersection.
Yeah. I mean, there's so much out there, but maybe a couple of books I'll mention. One is Financial Diaries, and it's just a look at kind of how people are managing their day-to-day financial lives, and it kind of follows individuals on their day-to-day journey of what it's like to make each financial decision. And it gives you real insight into how people are navigating day-to-day. Another one is Scarcity, which really talks about what it means to operate with scarcity of all sorts, but financial scarcity in particular, and what that does mentally to someone and what it means for how they're operating and living their lives. Because, and the reason I mention these two books in particular is that if you are trying to build in this space, you have to understand your customer.
Yeah.
And not just, I did a focus group or two, or I put a survey out there, right? But you need a deep understanding of what it means to be this customer. And that can be lived experience of being there yourself, or it can mean real in-depth knowledge building of that day-to-day life. And not just understanding, oh, they make this much, or having this kind of statistic-driven demographic understanding, but really understanding what goes into every financial decision they make, where are their stresses, at what points in their day are they thinking about these things, where is that coming up, all of that. And I think both these books, both from a kind of management and mindset perspective, give you real insights into the customer.
Oh, thank you for those.
Yeah.
It's also bringing up, there's this book I read, and of course I forget the title when needed, but I'll give the description in case you know the title, which is about an anthropologist who works minimum wage. She goes and works minimum wage jobs for a year, and then she writes her reflections and pretty much shows how it's impossible to live.
Yeah.
And so maybe I'll put it in the show notes and also send it your way because it's
please
also
do.
really
No,
helpful.
absolutely. And I think really understanding, right, like what it means to work that job, not just like from the perspective of what it means to have that small an amount of money coming in, but then are you working 3 of those jobs to pay your bills? And if you're working a service job, like how are you being treated? You're on your feet all day. What are the implications from a physical health perspective, from a mental health perspective of, doing that type of work? And, service workers, hospitality workers, for example, are one of the largest segments of employed Americans who are or underinsured when it comes to health insurance, right? So like really understanding the dynamics of being that worker is so critical.
Yeah. I'm like, that's a whole another conversation we can go into. Absolutely. But yeah, thank you for that. Any final asks or pieces of advice for our listeners?
Well, maybe two things. One is, if you are an entrepreneur, this is a space to build in. This is a moment where the challenges facing the majority of people and small businesses in this country, these challenges are only getting harder, right? In this current macro environment, it's not easy. It is a huge market opportunity. It is a massive market that is going to see growth. And it's a place where you can have huge impact. And so I would love to see more people build in this space. And I would love to, if you are building in this space, talk to you.
Yeah.
I'll leave it at that.
That's so good. That's so good. Where should folks start really briefly? Like if they're an entrepreneur who is like, I'm interested. Thank you so much for inspiring me. Where do I look? Where do I go?
Start with understanding the customer. I mean, as I talked about, really get to know your customer because you can't build without that understanding. We see so many businesses that say, oh, AI is really cool. I'm going to use AI to build this product. But that is a technology in search of a problem. And I think you have to start with a deep understanding of a problem and then find the technology to solve it, right? Yeah. And then there's great programs out there. I know you've talked to Sergio, but Robin Hood Labs Blue Ridge Accelerator is a great example of one that, they have a founder program where you don't need an idea. You can come in as a founder and use that program to build your idea, deepen your understanding of the customer, find co-founders in a team through all of that. So there's great accelerators, incubators, other programs that exist to support you on your journey.
I love it. Well, thank you.
Thank you
for your time. Thanks for being here. And thank you for what you're building as well with and through resilience. Tahira Dosani, everyone, co-founder, co-managing partner of Resilience VC. Thank you for being on.
Thank you so much. This was such a fun conversation. And as I said, I so appreciate your lens on community and the work you do because, being able to help create the scaffolding around what we do through that lens of community and create really provide the support for emerging managers because we are small organizations that are tight on resources and yet trying to build and do so much. And firms like yours existing and being there as a resource, I think, is part of the critical ecosystem that it takes for, this next set of next-gen managers to rise.
Thank you. That means a lot. Awesome. Thanks.
Wonderful.
Yay!